channel, and it's game time. A special presentation, the most watched cartoon of the 1980s, at least here in America. And I'm going to be counting them down. It's one of the most asked questions I get. I'm often known as one of the kings of the nerds around the area where I come from. I'm very much into nerdy things. I watched all these cartoons as a kid, or just about all of them. And now we're going to count down what the number one watched cartoons were for each year from 1980 to 1989. And remember, my stream is dedicated to Extra Life. A portion of everything I make goes to Extra Life, part of the Children's Miracle Network. So by supporting my channel, by liking, following, subscribing, and helping support Extra Life, which will help kids with long-term conditions in the hospital. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started and count down the uh, best of the 1980 cartoons. And we're going to start this off with 1980, the year that opened it up. And best cartoons out was Thundar the Barbarian. Often actually ran on Sunday mornings instead of Saturdays, but it was part of a set of cartoons that people would watch often before the martial arts movies would come on afterwards, or monster movies uh, by monster, I mean things like Godzilla and kaiju movies. Although you also had Elvira, which is the dark, and Thundar the Barbarian was a very, very popular cartoon when it premiered in 1980. All these cartoons debuted in the year that I'm talking about. But Thundar the Barbarian was the big cartoon from the 80s. And it started. Uh, Now, in 1981, we have a three the cartoons mentioned in no particular order. We have the Smurfs. Everybody, anybody and everybody was watching the Smurfs back in 1989. It was the cartoon to watch. And so early mornings, it was lighthearted. It was something good for all ages. Where the Smurfs would often, run from Gargamel and evil wizards, to get the Smurfs because you could use the Smurfs with some of his spells to Cindy's life and the other nefarious things. So the Smurfs was one of the great cartoons of 1980. Now, in addition to the Smurfs, we actually had uh, a imported comic cartoon, Danger Mouse, which came out of like, this is one of the few that I did not watch myself, but Danger Mouse was really big in '81 and arguably one of the most watched cartoons of the year. Finally, with Danger Mouse, you had Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Now, this is what I was watching Amazing Friends. Probably one of my favorite of all the animated Spider-Man series. The Spider-Man was joined by two former X-Men, uh, although at the time they were supposed to be in their time frame before they were possibly X-Men in a lot of ways, although it was kind of loosely adapted to the comic books because later episodes, uh, some of them would refer to their time as X-Men too. But you had Firestar and Iceman, Bobby Drake, and Firestar's real name at this time. I'm not going to go look it up. I've actually got limited time to do this one, and it may even be split into two depending on how the time goes. But Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends was also what probably of our three top year cartoons for 81. Now, in 1982, there was really just one cartoon that reigned the screen, kind of ruled the airwaves, and that was Pac-Man, one of the earliest adaptations of a video game into a cartoon. And Pac-Man was watched by millions of kids back in the early 80s. In 1982, Pac-Man was the show to watch. And then of all the shows that was viewed in 82, this is the one that everybody was watching. It was absolute runaway success. Now, that being said, uh, it doesn't mean there wasn't other great cartoons there, but that was the runaway. Now, in 83, that's when you forget a lot of the cartoons, which many of you will probably remember as some of the greatest cartoons of all time, including He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Now, we've got a live action movie of He-Man getting ready to come out. It's in the works. They tried one in the 80s, wasn't very good. They're doing a new one, and it's supposed to be much better. But and they've had a couple of reboots of He-Man, but He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was a runaway success with toys that were flying off the shelf. There were all the different members of the Masters of the Universe and Skeletor's evil gang. Uh, so He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was one of the big ones from the 1983 era, but it was not the only one. 83 also had a couple of other standouts. Uh, one that it was big in the end because we also have Alvin and the Chipmunks. They came to us. It was an adaptation based on the song uh, "The Witch Doctor," done by the Alvin and the Chipmunks. It was a musical sensation that got adapted into a cartoon, and everybody fell in love with these three chipmunks, Alvin, Sandy, and Pete. So they were out, but they were not completely outdone because another conversion. So we had a toy line, a game, a toy line, a song, and then a game as the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon also came out in 1983. This where a group of kids came to a funhouse ride, a roller coaster, and were transported to the realm of Dungeons and Dragons, where they were advised by the dungeon master, a diminutive character who was very mysterious and would kind of lead them. They were each given a magic item, uh, and they were told to protect these items. And Venger, the evil overlord, was out to try to steal the items, but you also had to watch out for Tiamat, the five-headed dramatic dragon, who would pop up and often harry our heroes. Uh, I am a big Dungeons and Dragons player and fan of the game, and I love the cartoon series as well. And so this was what people were watching in 1983. Oh, go to 84, and in 1984, like I said, in no particular order, we had the Transformers. Now, uh, many of what you have watched the live action and many of the rebooted cartoons for the Transformers were runaway hits. The toys flew off the shelf. It's one things that Hasbro has been absolutely focused on, and they're even working on doing crossover between the Transformers and GI Joe. in the next upcoming movies as they previewed it at the post-credit scene in the last Transformers live action movie. Uh, but the Transformers cartoon was one of the ones that had kids who knew who were sheep back in 1984. You could go to just about any school and find Transformers lunchboxes, Transformer t-shirts. Everybody was crazy mad for the Transformers in 1984. But that wasn't the only cartoon that 84 had going for it. It also had Voltron. If you want to talk giant robots, Voltron was also an amount, and I do realize this picture is probably, it's definitely from an older version of Voltron, but it was one of the best Voltron pictures that came up. Voltron was a, and there was two different versions of Voltron. There was the lion, there were five lions came together to create a giant robot, very similar to later days Power Rangers, although Power Rangers is more live action. But Voltron was there, and then later on, they had in later series they had Voltron where the air, land, and sea vehicles came together to create the giant robot. So uh, Voltron was a massive hit. Everybody was into giant robots in '84, so yeah, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a hit with those kind of things. So additional honorable mentions in this would be things like uh, Transformers Z, although I don't know officially when that one debuted. It's not actually part of my list. Uh, Finally, you had My Little Ponies, and let's see. In addition to the My Little Ponies, you also had another very kid-friendly one. This was a runaway success. I mean, in some ways, for the younger kids, even more popular than My Little Pony, and more popular than Transformers or Voltron for the younger kids. Still popular today was the Muppet Babies. Now, Muppets was a runaway sensation by Jim Henson. They were live puppets that were done in an old movie theater, and Kermit the Frog was the main Muppet, and he had several of his Muppet friends, and they were doing all these shows in the Muppet Theater, variety shows, special guests. Well, it was so popular that they decided to try a Muppet Baby cartoon, and it blew kids away. All the younger kids absolutely loved it. Even many of the older kids had watched Muppet Babies, and you could still hear their theme song running in your head. Muppet Babies, the dreams come true, and it just is ran over and over and over again. In fact, a popular comedian I know added Muppet Babies theme song to his montage of Saturday morning cartoon themes that he did. Uh, and so the Muppet Babies was a huge, huge popular cartoon back in '84. Now, we're going to move on to '85, and starting in '85, we're going to get a lot of competing, and we're going to get some honorable mentions as well. So, first off, Mask uh, was a kind of an answer to the Transformers craze, a different kind of super vehicles cartoon where each of the vehicles kind of transformed from one type of vehicle to another type of vehicle in some ways. Like they had a wing. The main car was a wing door car, and when the wing doors would open, they basically become like actual wings. They'd extend, and the car could fly. There was a motorbike that had a helicopter propeller come pulled out from the behind, and then it become like a little ornithopter for small mission stuff. There was a pickup truck that would lift up and out would shoot a jet boat, go through the water, things like that. It was special. And then they had a kid sidekick who had a robot that would turn into like a scooter, so he could putt around and try to help out as well. It was a very popular cartoon that debuted in 1985. In addition to the math, though, kids were also watching Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears. And Gummy Bears was based on fruit snacks that had come out, but Disney did an animated show about the Gummy Bears, and they had a catchy theme song, and kids, especially of the 12 years old and younger age, loved the Gummy Bears. The Gummy Bears jumping everywhere, and it was an amazing cartoon for that age group. It really appealed to kids and the Saturday morning crowd, and they loved to watch it even more than some of the action ones. It was just a really cute cartoon that was ultra popular. In addition to the Gummy Bears, we had She-Ra, Princess of Power. Now, last year in this countdown, we had He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. He-Man was so widely popular that a year later, He-Man was still going, but they did a spin-off. Cartoons didn't do a lot of spin-off, but He-Man's cousin, She-Ra, who was on a different world than Eternia, they discovered her and gave her a power sword, and she led her own group of Masters of the Universe as Princess of Power against Hordak and the Horde. And Hordak was the overlord that trained and mentored Skeletor. He was, Skeletor's boss. Skeletor was actually supposed to be taking over Eternity for Hordak. And in later episodes, Skeletor rebelled against Hordak because he had felt that he had taken over or was trying to take over Eternity and never quite succeeded. But if he did, he wanted to do it himself. But She-Ra was the spin-off of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and She-Ra had even more impressive powers than He-Man. He-Man could take his sword of power and made him one of the strongest characters in all of Eternia, and he could use it to zap his cowardly green tiger companion, Cringer, and turn him into Battle Cat, a riding, fierce warrior cat who could ride into battle. Well, She-Ra did the same thing with her horse, but it turned her horse into a Peganoticorn, the Pegasus unicorn combination, and her sword could turn into other weapons and items like a lasso, a spear. If she needed it, she could turn her sword of power into it. So she had a sword of power that was a very versatile weapon, and she had a lot of companions that helped her out. And most of her companions were female. So it was a very girl empowering cartoon. It was starting that era where the girl empowered cartoons were starting to come out. Let's see. What else do I have? 85. Oh, we got a couple more, and then we got some honorable mentions. We talked about Transformers. Well, the other Hasbro product that was big, came out in 1985, was G.I. Joe, the real American hero. And it was the tale of a special squad of military that was, multinational representative, and they were all specially trained individuals. Each one had an individual skill set. They were brought together, combined their individual talents to go up against Cobra, National Organization of Evildoers, International Organization of Evildoers that were trying to, take over the world. You may have seen the G.I. Joe movies. They had mixed results, but like I said, they're working on a new G.I. Joe Transformers combined movie. So this is kind of where the G.I. Joe craze got its start. And again, this one was based on a Hasbro toy line, and the toys flew off the shelf. It was the boy kid version of the Barbie. The Barbie girls were always buying the Barbie playsets, Barbie greenhouse. Well, all the young boys and the tomboys were buying G.I. Joes to bring in the G.I. Joe action figures. So G.I. Joe was a big hit in 1985, almost as big a hit as the Thundercats. Now, the Thundercats was one of the first of the American versions of anime. I'm sorry, you might have heard the door open in the background. Sorry about that. But yes, the Thundercats were a massive hit in '85. They've been rebooted a couple of times, and they're supposedly working on a live action Thundercats movie as well. I don't know where they are in that production right now. But the Thundercats were massive. It was America's answer to anime style, because anime was becoming huge in the United States. A lot of them was being imported after movies like Akira and shows like Robotech came over. Thundercats was one of the early answers to that for American cartoons. So Thundercats was huge, and it's been rebooted a couple of times. One of the reboots even took the original voice of Lion-O to voice Lion-O's father in the reboot. So it was definitely a massive hit in 1985. Now, these weren't the only real hits in '85. There's a couple of honorable mentions starting in '85 because there just really were so many cartoons. First off, you had the Care Bears. Like the Gummy Bears, you had the Care Bears. The Care Bears were based on a set of collectible teddy bears that each had a different emotional, like one of the first emoticons really on their stomach, and they would do a thing called the Care Bear stare, where they would shoot out like almost like the bat signal from their bellies, a beam that kind of represented the emotion that was represented by the emoticon on their belly. And the Care Bears would do it was another one of those cutesy ones, and it's an honorable mention. It wasn't the highest rated, but it was pretty highly rated by the younger kids especially. So Care Bears was a big one in 1985, but it wasn't the only one. '85 had a couple of honorable mentions. It also had the Ewoks of Star Wars fame. Star Wars is one of their first animated spin-offs was the Ewok, and all the Star Wars fans were watching the Ewok back in the day in 1985. There are actually two other, what is it? Two other? No, one other honorable mention in '85. In addition to that, and this goes to the whole girl power thing I was talking about before. It was Jim and the Holograms. Now this was a rock group named Jim who had a supercomputer that could project holograms, and it was linked to her uh, earrings. And her friends would use the holograms to transform into Jim and the Holograms, and they would do musical concerts, but they would also have to fight in battles of the band with more evil, quote unquote, evil bands, and like the Misfits. And it was girls versus girls, uh, so girl empowerment and bad guys, girl good guys, and it was very much in line with like She-Ra, but in more of a modern day rock band versus band instead of you know swords and science and sorcery. Uh, but yeah, that's definitely an honorable mention. It wasn't the highest rated, but it was up there, and a lot of people were watching Jim and the Hologram, and in some circles it may have even eclipsed it. Now, in 1986, the big cartoon that everybody was watching was based on the movie that came out in 1984. So in 1986, they came out with the real Ghostbusters. Now, a few people may or may not realize that there was a Ghostbusters cartoon a few years before, but it was not what the movie was based around. It had a special car that was kind of possessed by a ghost and everything, and it had completely different characters. It didn't have the core characters from the movie. But this was a cartoon adaptation from the movie, The Real Ghostbusters. And in 1986, it was one of the most watched cartoons. Now, in addition to that, we actually had a cartoon movie that was big enough to actually make the list. And and I didn't thought I had that movie on here, but I guess I didn't do a search for that, but that's okay. And that movie was the Transformers uh, animated movie, the first Transformers movie. Came out in 1986. I thought I had an image for that, but that's okay. I might have it buried in here. But a couple of honorable mentions in '86 was, of course, the hold on, because that should have been Mississippi. Oh, wait. Uh, was the Super Mario Brothers Super Squad, but I believe that was actually a honorable mention in '85. Somehow it got messed up in my notes, and I do apologize for that. Uh, this is actually got out of order, but the it was almost as popular as Jim and the Hologram and some of the other things. I thought there was a couple of honorable mentions in '85, but then in '86 we did have a couple of honorable mentions. Uh, and stuff is out of order. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's go back to my notes. Uh, 86. I'm going to refer more to my notes than I am to pictures right now because somehow I'm missing some. I don't remember where the Rescue Rangers came in, but in 86 we had honorable mention of the Pound Puppies and the Teen Wolf cartoon. Those were both honorable mentions. We're going to actually speed through now. In 87, uh, probably the most popular two cartoons, and they're pretty much neck and neck, was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and DuckTales. And they were fantastic cartoons. All of their companies was another one. Okay, let's go back to notes. Let's skip the images for the rest of it. But Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and DuckTales were big in 87. Pretty much they reigned supreme. In 88, we had the movie The Land Before Time. And we also had the semi-animated movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. They were actually huge. Uh, but in addition to that, for cartoons, we had The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and Cops, the animated series, and Garfield and Friends. All of those were pretty much neck and neck on TV. And then, as honorable mention, there was a couple more because we had, oh, that's where Oliver and Company comes in, and the Dino Riders. They were big as well. Uh, that was in 88. And we're finally up to 1989. And that's when probably one of the biggest cartoon hits of all premiered, The Simpsons, the first major primetime cartoon, a spinoff of the Tracy Ullman show. The Simpsons took the world by storm, and it's still going today. It is one of the longest running series, let alone cartoons, that has ever been created. Uh, and it is huge. Now, if you get away from prime time and the juggernaut that's The Simpsons, you also had Beetlejuice, Dragon Ball Z, and here's where we had Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers and the Super Mario Brothers Super Squad. That's what it was in 1989. I don't know how my images got a little bit shuffled, and I do apologize for that. I'll do this another time. Hopefully, my next list will be a little bit better organized when it comes to my images. You just have to get so many images stored on the browser tab. They start to jumble together. They get out of order. But like I said, the animated Beetlejuice, one of the anime imports that finally gets a unlike Voltron was an anime import, but after Voltron, we don't really see another major anime import until Dragon Ball Z comes in. And then, like I said, Chicken Dale's Rangers and the Super Mario Brothers Super Squad. It's another one of the video game tie-ins. And like the movie, the Super Mario Brothers that recently came out, not the old one that came out in the 80s, but the recent one, it was a massive success. And that rounded out 1989, and that brought us into 1990. Now, possibly I'll do another countdown. If you like this, remember to follow, like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you like this list. If you have some other choices you think from these years that debuted in these years that you think were bigger hits or should have made the list as at least honorable mentions. And we'll see. And let me know if you want to see another list. You want to see 1990s? I can always go through those as well. I always still watch the cartoons. I still watch some cartoons now, although some of the most popular ones today. But I do love a lot of the Cartoon Network stuff that came out only a few years ago. Actually, that other movie, other lists of cartoons from those other areas of the world. Let me know down in the comments. Remember, like I said, you like, subscribe, and anything that you do with my channel, any money that I make, a portion of that goes to the Children's Miracle Network to Extra Life, helping kids with long conditions. So once again, thank you so much for watching my channel. This has been Gaming C, also known as Doc, one of the kings of the nerds, and nice looking anyway. And I want to thank you all for watching. And in the immortal words of Stanley Excelsior, have a great time.